For 4 years of college, Caleb was essentially Leo Sterling's shadow. When Leo played basketball, Caleb was there with a bottle of Gatorade. When Leo headed for the communal showers, Caleb would be there to make sure he had a clean towel. Caleb's acceptance into his graduate program was pending a second attempt at the GREs, leaving him temporarily without a place to stay. Leo, without a second thought, offered him a room at his family's estate. That evening, however, Caleb was stopped at the front door by Leo's older brother, Julian. Julian's voice was low and cool. He told Caleb to stay away from his brother, explaining that the family needed Leo to carry on the Sterling name. Caleb was stunned, assuring him it was all a misunderstanding. Julian calmly lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating his sharp features. He questioned whether it truly was a misunderstanding. To supervise them, he declared Caleb would be sleeping in his room from then on. Caleb and Leo's friendship was as solid as they came. Throughout their undergraduate years at the prestigious Northeastern University, they were inseparable. As a scion of extreme wealth, Leo possessed a collection of habits that baffled his less affluent dorm mates. He never cleaned, for instance, but was paradoxically a severe germaphobe. Initially, the other roommates sneered at his princely behavior. That changed when Leo transferred $5,000 to each of them as a cleaning fee. He had explained, with genuine sheepishness, that he truly didn't know how to do chores and offered a monthly retainer for their services. He also confessed he couldn't change his own bedsheets and offered $100 each time someone did it for him. Within an hour, Caleb and the others had drawn up a detailed duty roster. They even added a suite of premium services, such as fetching his morning artisanal coffee and saving him a seat in packed lecture halls. Caleb had once asked Leo why, with his family's resources, he subjected himself to the cramped squalor of a dorm. Couldn't he just rent a penthouse nearby and hire staff? Leo had sighed with the dramatic flair of a tragic hero, explaining it was his brother Julian's idea of a character-building exercise. If Leo dared to move off campus, his allowance would be cut off. Caleb, morbidly curious, inquired about the size of this allowance. Leo paused, admitting he'd never really counted. His brother just deposited $100,000 into his account at the beginning of each month, and he'd ask for more if it ran out. Caleb nearly fell over. He then slid smoothly to the floor and hugged Leo's leg, proclaiming that from that day forward, Leo was his brother. Leo wasn't just generous. He was easygoing and kind, barring the occasional bout of entitlement and a complete lack of basic life skills. As time went on, Caleb's actions were born from genuine friendship, and he eventually stopped accepting Leo's money. Leo, deeply moved, insisted on treating Caleb to late-night meals, which always consisted of takeout from Michelin-starred restaurants. Their bond deepened, and the dorm felt harmonious. Or so Caleb thought. One afternoon, Leo was summoned home for a business gala. He changed into a tailored suit and left an hour early for a styling appointment at a high-end salon. To Caleb, this was normal. A sterling heir had to maintain appearances. But the moment Leo was gone, the other two roommates began their snide commentary. They mocked his pretentious air, calling him a fool playing dress-up. One remarked that if he'd been born into that family, he wouldn't be as useless as Leo. Caleb was shocked and couldn't stop himself from speaking up. He reminded them how well Leo treated them and questioned their hypocrisy. They looked at him with disdain, telling him to stop being such a sycophant. They claimed to merely tolerate Leo for his money and mocked Caleb for taking his role as the poor friend so seriously. Rage ignited in Caleb. He pointed out how often they borrowed money from Leo with no intention of paying it back. He told them that Leo considered them friends, while they saw him as a walking ATM. The accusation hit its mark. They stood up, ready to argue, but a sharp knock echoed from the half-open door. The man standing there was an older, sharper version of Leo. Dressed in a bespoke suit, his dark eyes were unreadable pools of calm, exuding a quiet authority that was the antithesis of Leo's golden retriever energy. He asked if this was Leo Sterling's room, identifying himself as his brother. The other two roommates fell silent, guilt written all over their faces. Caleb shot them a glare before answering loudly that yes, it was. Julian inquired about Leo's whereabouts. Caleb informed him that he had just left. Julian's gaze lingered on Caleb for a moment before he gave a curt nod of thanks and left. Leo didn't return to the dorm that night. The next morning, he burst in, ecstatic. He threw an arm around Caleb, announcing the incredible news that his brother had suddenly agreed to rent him an off-campus apartment. It took Caleb a moment to realize that Julian hadn't told Leo what he'd overheard. Instead, he had simply removed his brother from the toxic situation. Caleb felt a pang of envy for Leo having such a protective older brother. Leo then added that Julian had suggested he ask Caleb to move in with him. It was a 2-bedroom. Leo winked, speculating that Julian probably wanted a reliable influence to keep him from skipping class. Julian had apparently told Leo that Caleb seemed like a dependable person. He pleaded with Caleb to agree, saying he'd rather have him as a roommate than some stranger Julian might hire to watch over him. Caleb agreed instantly, relieved to escape the two-faced roommates. They submitted their off-campus housing application and began their new life together. Soon, whispers followed Caleb around campus, labeling him a gold digger. He knew who was spreading the rumors but tried to ignore them. His life wasn't defined by gossip. Leo, however, heard the rumors and was furious. He ended up punching one of the guys who had been bad-mouthing Caleb. As a person of interest, Caleb was summoned to the dean's office. It was the second time he met Julian Sterling. The normally stern dean seemed almost flustered in the face of Julian's commanding presence. The dean explained the situation, noting that Leo had physically assaulted another student who was now in the hospital. The student's parents were demanding. Julian cut him off smoothly. He thanked the dean for his time and stated that since it was a mutual fight, his family would, out of goodwill, cover 3 times the medical expenses. However, there would be no apology. If the other party found this unacceptable, his lawyers would handle the matter, pursuing charges of defamation and malicious slander against Leo. He assured the dean that the university would not be negatively impacted. Leo, his face bruised, followed his brother out of the office like a scolded puppy. But Julian's first words were directed at Caleb. He asked if his name was Caleb. Caleb nodded vigorously. Leo, despite his fear, stepped in front of Caleb protectively, insisting it had nothing to do with him. A cold glance from Julian was enough to make Leo shrink back, leaving Caleb exposed. Caleb swallowed nervously. The powerful aura Julian naturally projected was intimidating. Julian seemed to be studying him, his gaze different from their first meeting, holding something Caleb couldn't decipher. He commented on their close relationship. Leo jumped in to elaborate on just how great Caleb was to him, even mentioning that Caleb helped scrub his back in the shower. Julian's brow furrowed slightly. He asked if they showered together, if Caleb touched him. The question hung in the air, suddenly charged with an odd implication. Leo, oblivious, boasted that showering together was nothing. In the dorm's communal showers, everyone was naked anyway. Besides, he added, Caleb was gentle. Julian pressed further, reminding Leo of his extreme aversion to being touched. Leo's response was simple. Caleb was different. They were best friends. A faint, unreadable smile touched Julian's lips, sending a shiver down Caleb's spine. Leo, as if suddenly grasping the undertone, yelped that Julian shouldn't get any funny ideas. He declared loudly that unlike his brother, he was into women. Leo later explained to Caleb that his brother was gay. He told Caleb he could Google Julian Sterling kissing male companion to see the old tabloid photos that had once gone viral. Caleb was speechless. Leo then grew serious, assuring Caleb that while such things could be genetic, it wasn't a guarantee, and he was definitely straight. A moment later, he was worrying aloud that Julian now suspected their friendship was inappropriate and might not let them live together anymore. A sense of dread washed over Caleb. The thought of losing the apartment, with its air conditioning, private bathrooms, and the freedom to cook whatever they wanted, was unbearable. He knew he had no standing. Julian rented the apartment. If he wanted Caleb gone, Caleb had no choice but to leave. Leo, however, suddenly had a brilliant idea. His solution was to get a girlfriend, and fast. Caleb was shocked, assuming it was a random girl Leo found to deceive his brother. But it turned out Leo had been nursing a crush on her for a year and used the situation as an excuse to finally confess his feelings. They stayed together until graduation, when the long-distance reality of their different career paths led to a painful breakup. The night they broke up, Leo dragged Caleb out drinking. Caleb had to practically carry him back to the apartment while Leo sobbed like a child. He cried about how she didn't believe he was willing to move to her hometown for her, insisting he could have convinced his brother. The night ended with Leo getting violently ill and spiking a fever. Caleb had no choice but to call Julian. While Caleb struggled to change Leo out of his soiled shirt, Leo latched onto him in a drunken stupor. He mumbled Caleb's name, begging him not to leave, to stay with him. It was a terrible coincidence that Leo's ex-girlfriend was named Carrie. An even worse coincidence was Julian walking through the door just as Leo, clinging to Caleb, pushed him down onto the sofa. Leo was still whispering, "I love you." Caleb was sweating profusely. He was so close to telling him he'd be right there, to just shut up. He tried to muffle Leo's mouth, but Leo thrashed, sending them both tumbling to the floor. Caleb landed face first, narrowly avoiding kissing him, and recoiled with a gag at the stench of alcohol. When he looked up, Julian was holding out a box of tissues. The embarrassment was so intense Caleb's foot cramped, a real seizing cramp. He sat on the floor, his face contorted in pain as he clutched his foot. Julian lifted Leo onto the sofa before turning to him. Seeing Caleb still on the floor, he moved closer. A faint, clean scent of sandalwood enveloped Caleb as he was lifted effortlessly into the air. Caleb protested that he was fine, just a cramp, and asked to be put down. Julian placed him gently on the other end of the sofa. He offered to look at it. Caleb, mortified, insisted he was okay, but Julian took his ankle, his fingers expertly finding the cramped muscle and applying firm pressure. After a sharp cry of pain, the tension subsided. Caleb flexed his foot cautiously. It was better. He thanked him quietly. They spent the rest of the night at the hospital. Leo was put on an 4-drip and finally fell into a quiet sleep. Caleb and Julian sat on either side of the bed in an awkward silence. Caleb broke it, explaining that Leo was just heartbroken over the breakup and that Julian shouldn't be too hard on him. Julian took a deep breath and agreed. The silence returned, thick and heavy. After a while, he asked Caleb about his post-graduation plans. Caleb admitted he hadn't scored high enough on his GREs and was planning to study for a retake. Julian asked if he would study at home or stay here. Caleb wanted to stay for the academic environment. Julian noted that he wasn't from the area and would need to find a place to live. Caleb scratched his head, confirming he was looking for an apartment. The issue was finding an affordable studio near campus. Larger apartments required roommates, which was a hassle to coordinate. The main issue, of course, was money. His undergraduate degree was funded by student loans, and his living expenses were covered by part-time tutoring. His family wanted him to get a job immediately and wouldn't support his graduate studies financially. A sigh escaped him as he considered his predicament. Julian then mentioned that Leo had suggested letting Caleb continue to stay in their current apartment. Caleb looked up and met Julian's searching gaze, feeling a jolt. Leo truly was a good friend. But as touched as he was, he knew Julian was already suspicious of their relationship. With Leo now single, Caleb couldn't afford to fuel those suspicions. He quickly refused the offer, insisting he would find his own place. Julian nodded thoughtfully. He asked if Caleb minded having roommates. Caleb, momentarily confused, said he didn't. He wondered if Julian was offering to help him find a place, just to put some distance between him and Leo. A short while later, Julian's driver took Caleb back to the apartment. He was relieved to escape the tense atmosphere. He never expected that a few days later, a fully recovered Leo would return with astounding news. He told Caleb to stop his apartment search. His brother had invited Caleb to come live with them at their family home. Caleb dragged his suitcase into the sprawling mansion in the city's most exclusive gated community. He felt awkward, knowing that living in someone's home was different from crashing in a rented apartment. But Leo was enthusiastic, telling him not to feel weird. Their father was always abroad, and Julian was so busy with work he was rarely home. He said Caleb's presence would be good company, especially now that he was single again. Hearing that Julian was usually absent, Caleb's anxiety eased. He felt a certain reverence for Julian, who, despite being only 5 years older, felt like a paternal figure. Julian had taken over the family's domestic business operations after their parents divorced and started new families. Their father had moved abroad with his new wife, leaving Julian to raise Leo. The vast mansion was cold and impersonal. The only family picture was a single portrait of the two brothers in the living room. It was a stark confirmation of Caleb's image of their family. The housekeeper prepared dinner and left. As Leo reached for 2 beers from the fridge, Caleb stopped him, reminding him he was just out of the hospital. Leo waved it off, saying he was fine and that they had to celebrate Caleb's first night there. As they argued, the front door opened. Julian was home. Leo was surprised, asking why he was back from his business trip so soon. Julian's eyes flickered from the beer in Leo's hand to Caleb's face. He smiled, a gentle expression that didn't quite reach his eyes. He said he had to be there to properly welcome his brother's friend. Caleb was flattered but inwardly groaned. He wished Julian had stayed busy and just pretended he didn't exist. With Julian present, Leo sheepishly returned the beer to the fridge. The dinner was lavish, and Leo had clearly told the housekeeper all of Caleb's favorite dishes. He enthusiastically piled food onto Caleb's plate: Cajun shrimp, sweet and sour pork belly, crispy eggplant fries. Caleb was enjoying himself until he looked up and met Julian's gaze. It was that same deep, analytical look from before. The food suddenly lost its flavor. He grew tense, gently stopping Leo's attempts to serve him more food. He insisted he could help himself. Leo, oblivious to his brother's scrutiny, cheerfully continued his efforts. The meal was an exercise in anxiety for Caleb. Leo's room was on the 2nd floor, and Caleb's guest room was directly across the hall. After dinner, Caleb tried to escape to his room, but Julian stopped him. He wanted to talk. They walked along a quiet, winding path through the manicured grounds of the community. A large ornamental pond loomed ahead, and an absurd fear pricked at Caleb. Surely the head of the Sterling Corporation wouldn't drown him in a koi pond just because he suspected him of having an affair with his brother. He asked Julian what he wanted to discuss. Julian stopped and turned to face him. He commented on the shoes Caleb was wearing, identifying them as last year's Louis Vuitton collaboration, a gift from Leo. Caleb swallowed, feeling a prickle of guilt as he admitted they were a birthday present. Julian then tilted his head, mentioning that the suitcase Caleb brought upstairs looked familiar. Caleb was amazed at his attention to detail and quickly explained it was an old suitcase of Leo's that he'd been given. Julian stated its price blandly, $12,000. It was Hermes. Caleb felt a dizzying sense of vertigo. He was so far out of his depth. He knew Leo was wealthy, but the casual extravagance was on another level. He now understood the source of Julian's subtle hostility. In Julian's eyes, Caleb was not just living off his brother, but also accepting extravagant gifts. It was no wonder he was concerned. Finally, Julian got to the point. He acknowledged their close friendship and said he respected Leo's choices. However, he noted that Leo's level of care for Caleb far exceeded what he considered normal for a platonic male friendship. Caleb quickly interjected, reminding Julian that Leo had a girlfriend. Well, an ex-girlfriend, but that he was definitely not gay. And you? Julian's single question was a surgical strike. His sharp, predatory gaze locked onto Caleb, searching for any flicker of emotion. Are you interested in men or women? Caleb's mouth opened, but no answer came. Did he like men or women? He'd never really liked anyone. He'd never been drawn to pretty girls, but he'd also never felt a spark for any particular guy. The question left him completely stumped. A faint, mocking smile played on Julian's lips as he pulled out a cigarette and a lighter. The jet of blue flame from the silver lighter illuminated his deep-set eyes. He said the answer wasn't important. All he wanted was for Caleb to remember not to have any inappropriate ideas about Leo. He told him to keep his distance, reminding him that the Sterling family was counting on Leo to produce an heir. The mention of heirs made Caleb's scalp tingle. He insisted again that Julian was mistaken, that his friendship with Leo was purely platonic. Julian watched him with a theatrical amusement, exhaling a plume of smoke that vanished into the night air. He claimed to have a high sensitivity for his own kind. He then made a suggestion. From now on, Caleb would share a room with him. Caleb's jaw nearly unhinged. He questioned the logic of the arrangement. Regardless of his own orientation, Julian was gay. Wasn't that just blatant sexual harassment? He told Julian to be reasonable. If anything were going to happen between him and Leo, it would have happened during the years they lived together. Wasn't it a bit late for supervision? For the first time, Julian laughed out loud. It was a genuine, unrestrained sound that transformed his usually severe face. He conceded that Caleb had a point. Seeing this brief glimpse of a more human Julian, Caleb felt a bit bolder. He was ready to leave if necessary. So what if he couldn't live in a luxury mansion? So what if he had to go back to ramen noodles? But then he remembered it was Julian who had invited him here in the first place, only to now treat him like a threat. Julian then did something even more surprising. He took a bank card from his pocket. Caleb's mind raced. He imagined the classic line, "Here's $5 million. Leave my brother." Should he take it? Maybe he could pretend he really did have a secret crush on Leo and walk away with the money. Julian's words, however, were not what he expected. He said Leo had told him Caleb was working part-time to support himself. Since he was determined to get into grad school, he should focus on his studies. The card had $50,000 on it, with the pin being Leo's birthday. He told Caleb to ask for more if he needed it. Caleb hesitated, not taking the card. He felt it was wrong to accept the money, especially since he was already staying in their home for free. Julian clarified it was a loan, not a gift. He explained, with the cold logic of a businessman, that a person's time and energy are finite. While working to support oneself was admirable, a smart person would leverage available resources to their advantage. Caleb thought for a moment and finally took the card. The past year of juggling work and studying had indeed taken its toll. With only 5 months until the exam, he couldn't let pride get in the way. He promised to work hard and pay him back after the test. Julian's lips curved into a slight smile. He told him there was no hurry, and that Caleb could always consider other ways of repaying the debt. Caleb instinctively clutched his chest. What kind of ways? He soon found out what Julian meant by other ways. A few days later, both brothers had dinner engagements, leaving Caleb alone in the house. Around 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. He went to the video intercom and saw a handsome young man standing outside. The man asked if Jules was home, identifying himself as a friend. It was obviously someone looking for Julian. Caleb explained that Julian wasn't there and suggested he call him. The man on the screen pulled out his phone. Caleb could hear his one-sided conversation, asking Julian when he'd be home and saying he was already at the gate. The man then held his phone up to the camera, asking Caleb to please open the gate, as Julian would be home soon. Caleb let him in. The moment the man saw Caleb's pajamas, his friendly demeanor vanished. He demanded to know who Caleb was and why he was living there. Seeing the alarm and hostility in his eyes, Caleb immediately pieced together the situation. This must be one of Julian's suitors. He quickly explained he was Leo's classmate, just staying there temporarily. Hearing this, the man's expression softened. He introduced himself as Ethan and proceeded to launch into a long, one-sided conversation about his history with Julian. By the time Julian walked in, Caleb knew how they'd met and the details of their last encounter. From Ethan's telling, they were just one step away from making their relationship official. When Julian arrived, Ethan jumped up to greet him, nearly throwing himself into his arms. He complained that Julian hadn't been answering his texts, and that he thought he was being avoided. Caleb gave Julian an awkward smile and tried to discreetly slip away to give them space. But Julian sidestepped Ethan's embrace and, inexplicably, said to Caleb, "Don't misunderstand. There's nothing between us." Ethan's smile froze on his face. Julian walked directly to Caleb's side. "Believe me," he said, his voice now laced with an almost pleading tone that was completely out of character. "I've never done anything to betray you." Goosebumps erupted on Caleb's skin. What was this sudden amateur theater? Out of Ethan's line of sight, Julian mouthed 2 words to him. "Play along." Play along with what? Getting rid of a persistent admirer? Ethan, finally recovering, pointed a trembling finger at Caleb. He reminded him that he'd claimed to be Leo's classmate. This was a scenario no textbook had prepared him for. Flight was his only instinct. Thinking fast, Caleb wrenched his arm from Julian's grasp. "You cheat," he yelled, his voice dripping with fabricated betrayal. "He shows up at our home and you still expect me to believe your excuses? I don't want to hear another word from you." With that, he turned and stormed up the stairs. His recent diet of trashy reality shows had prepared him well. The dialogue came naturally. 30 minutes later, he received a text from Julian. Debt reduced by 10,000. Caleb had somehow become Julian's human shield against unwanted suitors. While it didn't drastically affect his life, he felt a strange sense of unease, as if he'd been forcibly outed. When he complained to Leo about it, Leo was not sympathetic at all. Instead, he was giddy with excitement, hungry for gossip. Leo told him he knew Ethan, that the guy had been obsessed with his brother for years. The tabloid scandal about Julian's sexuality was Ethan's doing. He had hired a photographer to take misleading photos. It was just a conversation, but the angle made it look like a kiss. Julian had rejected him countless times, but Ethan was relentless. Because their fathers were friends, Julian couldn't be too harsh. Caleb, Leo declared, had done his brother a huge favor. But the story didn't end there. A few nights later, Julian knocked on his bedroom door. Caleb had just showered and, assuming it was Leo, opened the door wearing only a towel. By the time he saw who it was too late to shut it. It was strange. Leo had said Julian was barely ever home, but since Caleb moved in, he seemed to be there every night. Julian was visibly taken aback, his pupils dilating for a split second before he averted his gaze. He said drily that while he was glad Caleb felt at home, he would appreciate it if he showed some respect for his sexual orientation. Caleb was mortified. He stammered that he thought it was Leo, that he didn't know Julian was back. Julian told him to be properly dressed around him in the future, then instructed him to put on some clothes. Caleb scrambled to grab a t-shirt and shorts and changed in the bathroom. Only when he was fully dressed did Julian enter the room. Caleb nervously tugged at the hem of his shirt, asking if he needed something. Julian was direct. He had a party the next evening and wanted to know if Caleb had time to accompany him. Caleb pointed at his own nose, his expression clearly asking, "Me? Why me?" Before he could refuse, Julian added, "As my boyfriend." Caleb's eye twitched. Fending off one guy was one thing, but posing as his boyfriend at a party was another level entirely. He said he didn't think it was appropriate. Julian acknowledged it was a difficult request, so he offered to write off another $20,000 of the debt. He promised it wouldn't take much time, that Caleb just had to show up. Caleb's mind did a quick calculation. Sounded like a good deal. He asked what he would need to do. Seeing him agree, Julian smiled slightly. He just needed to stay by his side and enjoy the food and drinks. That, Caleb thought, was his specialty. The next afternoon, Caleb skipped his library study session to wait at the mansion. When Leo heard about the plan, he was ecstatic, practically bouncing off the walls. He immediately called Julian, insisting he wanted to come along to witness Caleb playing the role of his boyfriend. He then helped Caleb pick out an outfit, a seemingly simple white t-shirt and jeans, but from brands whose names Caleb couldn't even pronounce. Leo explained that the party was for Julian's circle of friends, and that Ethan would be there, still convinced Julian was just toying with Caleb. He insisted Caleb had to look good, to show that Julian was treating him well and that their relationship was serious. Caleb nearly bit his tongue. He pointed out that Leo was getting into character a little too quickly. Leo just grinned, saying he had to get used to the idea of Caleb being his sister-in-law to avoid blowing their cover. He then reached out to help Caleb change, just as Julian walked in. Julian raised an eyebrow. He asked Leo if he was getting used to it by undressing his sister-in-law while his brother was away. The words hung in the air, charged and intense. Even Leo shivered, quickly letting go of Caleb's shirt. He stammered that Julian was taking the joke too far. Julian glanced at the jeans on the sofa and placed a shopping bag on the coffee table. He told Caleb to throw away Leo's ugly clothes and change into the outfit he'd brought. As Caleb went upstairs with the bag, he felt a strange stirring. This felt real. Felt like Julian was taking care of him. The thought of being a domineering CEO's boyfriend, a role he was only pretending to play, suddenly felt less like a game. It was all Leo's fault for putting these ridiculous ideas in his head. When they left, Julian drove. Caleb instinctively opened the back door to sit with Leo, but Julian turned and told him to sit in the front. Leo was quicker to catch on, shooing Caleb towards the passenger seat and reminding him to remember his role for the evening. Caleb sighed. What role was that? The indebted student or the freeloader? But Julian was his crore, and Caleb knew he had to play by his rules. He obediently moved to the front. The party was at a discreet private club that looked like a natural rock formation from the outside. If Julian hadn't pushed open a hidden door in the stone wall, Caleb would have never found the entrance. He instinctively started walking beside Leo, but Leo pushed him toward his brother, whispering for him to act more intimate. Julian then simply took Caleb's hand. The warmth and strength of his palm enveloping his own sent a strange jolt through Caleb's arm. It wasn't unpleasant, just unfamiliar. He felt half his body go numb, but Julian didn't even glance at him. He just murmured for Caleb to watch his step. This was the effortless confidence of an older man. It was terrifyingly effective. Caleb swallowed hard, a feeling growing in his gut that this was far more complicated than he'd initially thought. The party hadn't even started, and they were already holding hands. He glanced back at Leo, who was grinning like an idiot. He wondered if his friend was actually enjoying this a little too much. The private room was enormous, dominated by a round table that could seat 20. Many guests were already there. When they saw Julian, they all rose to greet him. Julian led Caleb straight to the head of the table, apologizing for being late due to traffic. Everyone's eyes naturally fell on Caleb. Their curiosity peaked when they saw his hand linked with Julian's. A palpable shift occurred in the room's atmosphere. Many guests shot surreptitious glances at Ethan, who sat sullenly in his chair, his eyes fixed on Caleb with undisguised hostility. Someone teased Julian, asking when he'd gotten into a new relationship without telling anyone. Julian just smiled faintly. He replied that success is born of secrecy, and that Caleb hadn't fully accepted him yet. Caleb was amazed. Was this a skill all successful men possessed? The ability to lie with such poetic flair? The room filled with playful jeers. Caleb, blushing, sat quietly between the two brothers, feeling like a decoration. Thankfully, the conversation soon moved on to other topics. Leo had briefed him earlier. Everyone here was an heir from a family with business ties to the Sterlings. They met every few months, though Julian rarely attended. No one would fixate on Julian's love life for long, except, of course, for Ethan. Caleb focused on eating. The Sterling brothers worked in tandem, constantly filling his bowl. Leo would occasionally lean in to whisper details about the people at the table. Then, Ethan spoke up, his voice cutting through the chatter. He addressed Leo, commenting on how close he and Caleb were in college, calling Caleb Leo's little follower. He then asked if it was true they lived together for years. The room fell silent. Even the thick-skinned Leo could sense the malice in Ethan's words. He frowned, his tone sharp. He corrected Ethan, saying Caleb was his best friend, not a follower, and what they did was none of his business. Ethan scoffed and took a long drink. He then said, in a tone of mock amusement, that he wondered if Julian had taken Caleb for himself to stop him from turning his little brother gay. Caleb's heart sank. The man was disturbingly perceptive. He had guessed the original, albeit twisted, motivation. The other guests exchanged silent, knowing glances. Caleb pretended not to notice. Leo, however, was furious. He slammed down his chopsticks and started yelling, asking Ethan if he was insane. Julian remained calm. He simply glanced at Ethan and said, "That's correct. But if I didn't like him, I would have no need to pursue him. Wouldn't you agree?" Ethan was speechless, his eyes turning red. Hearing Julian admit his feelings for Caleb seemed to be a greater blow than seeing them hold hands. He stood up abruptly. "You're just trying to hurt me," he accused. "You could never really be with a broke nobody like him. I know you want to get rid of me, but you don't have to humiliate me with someone like that." Leo exploded again. "Keep your mouth shut. What do you mean, someone like that? Caleb is better looking and taller than you. If you don't know how to speak, don't spew garbage at the dinner table." Caleb grabbed Leo's arm, trying to calm him down. Julian moved then, leaning back in his chair and observing Ethan like a specimen. After a long moment, he spoke, his voice cold as ice. "You're overthinking it. You aren't that important." He then gave Ethan two choices. 1. Apologize to Caleb immediately. 2. Leave the party and never show his face at one of their gatherings again. Ethan stared in disbelief. The other guests held their breath. The situation had escalated far beyond Caleb's expectations. He suspected Julian had been waiting for an excuse to banish Ethan from his life, and Caleb was the convenient pretext. It was a perfectly justifiable reason to defend his new lover. He could even build a reputation as a devoted partner. As Caleb marveled at the strategic brilliance of the corporate titan, he missed the utterly dumbfounded look on Leo's face. In the end, Ethan reluctantly raised his glass, downed the contents, muttered a hasty apology, and left. The brief disruption was quickly washed away by a new round of toasts. Caleb, full from the meal, started to feel drowsy. As he sat there in a daze, he felt Julian squeeze his hand under the table. Julian told him not to take Ethan's words to heart. It took Caleb a moment to realize Julian thought he was upset by the insults. He assured him he didn't care. A small smile played on Julian's lips. He leaned close, his voice a low whisper in Caleb's ear. "But what I said, I hope you'll consider it seriously." Caleb spent the entire night considering what Julian wanted him to consider. At 8 in the morning, he came downstairs with dark circles under his eyes and found an equally exhausted-looking Leo at the breakfast table. Leo now had to show up at the family company to learn the business, so he was also up early. They stared at each other blankly. Caleb glanced nervously toward the stairs and asked if his brother had left. Leo confirmed he had an early meeting. Caleb relaxed and started on his sandwich. Leo hesitated several times before finally speaking. He asked Caleb to be honest with him. Was his thing with Julian really fake? When Caleb looked confused, Leo clarified. He was asking if they were developing real feelings for each other. He explained that it was strange. Ethan had been bothering Julian for years, and even after the tabloid incident, Julian had never lost his temper like he did last night. Caleb asked if Julian had really lost his temper. He had seemed so calm. Leo nearly shrieked. He explained that when Julian told Ethan to leave the gathering, it was a signal to everyone else at that table to cut all ties with him. He asked if Caleb understood the implication now. Caleb hadn't known the subtext of their world. No wonder Ethan had swallowed his pride and apologized. A wave of confusion washed over him. Did this mean Julian actually liked him? But why? What was there to like? Leo looked just as bewildered. He knew his brother liked men, but he had no idea what his type was, since Julian had never dated anyone. Then, a look of dawning horror crossed Leo's face. "Oh God," he said. "You're handsome, you're sweet, you have a great personality. Of course he'd fall for you. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize he had ulterior motives." He then puffed out his chest. "But don't worry. As long as I'm here, I won't let him do anything to you. Besides," he added, "it takes two to tango. You don't like guys, so you can just ignore him." Caleb opened his mouth, but again, nothing came out. Leo's eyes widened in dawning terror. Wait, you don't like guys, right? He clutched his chest dramatically. Oh my God. You're gay too? What about all those years we shared a room? All those showers? I guess it just means you're a rich philanthropist helping out a poor roommate, Caleb deadpanned. He suddenly felt a spike of fear that this revelation would change things, that Leo would question their entire friendship. But before he could figure out how to navigate the conversation, Leo's mind had already jumped to a new conclusion. Hey, but wait a minute, Leo said, his expression shifting from horror to delight. If you really become my sister-in-law, that means we can be together forever. That's awesome. It's perfect. I was worried my brother would get a partner who'd drive a wedge between us. But if it's you, the three of us could have a great life. Caleb walked out of the house in a daze. As soon as he stepped outside, a black Maybach was already waiting for him. The driver opened the door. From his first day at the mansion, Julian had assigned him a private car and driver. At first, Caleb had felt awkward, but Julian had convinced him with his usual ruthless efficiency logic, arguing that taking public transportation would waste 40 minutes of his life each day. Looking back, it was another sign. Who assigns a private driver to their brother's classmate unless they have an ulterior motive? Leo came out right behind him and, seeing the car, got a sly look in his eye. He announced that the driver could drop him off at the office on the way. The driver turned to him with a polite but firm smile. Mr. Sterling Jr. Mr. Sterling Sr. Specifically instructed that your continued use of a bicycle share for your commute would be beneficial for your physical fitness. Leo's face fell. Maybe their life together wouldn't be so great after all. Julian was supposed to be on a business trip for a week. Caleb thought he'd have some time to breathe and think. Instead, his phone was bombarded with dozens of messages a day. Julian would text him before a meeting, before a meal, and once even sent him a picture of a bird he saw on the street. If Caleb took more than half an hour to reply, a wire transfer for $1,000 would appear in his chat. It was a brutally effective way to get a response. Caleb, too timid to accept, let every single one expire. Julian finally asked why he wasn't accepting the money. Caleb joked that he still owed him $30,000 and was afraid of accumulating interest. Julian immediately sent another transfer, this time with the note, "Voluntary gift." Caleb politely replied, "Thank you," and instantly accepted it. Only a fool would turn down free money. Julian's reply came a second later. "You're welcome. I'm pursuing you. This is what I should be doing." Caleb drew a sharp breath. He had never encountered such a direct approach. He sat in the library, unable to focus on a single page of his textbook. This man was ruining his concentration. He was in the cafeteria, having just sat down with his tray, when a video call from Julian came through. He quickly put in his earbuds. Julian appeared to be in a hotel room, his tie loosened but his hair still perfectly styled. In contrast, Caleb, in his small window, looked like a wreck, with glasses, flat hair, and the exhausted pallor of a student deep in exam prep. Julian asked to see what he was eating. Caleb flipped the camera to show his plate of kung pao chicken and stir-fried tomatoes with eggs. Julian remarked that he seemed to have a thing for chicken. Caleb retorted that it was called brand loyalty. As they were talking, two figures stopped at his table. He looked up and saw his two former roommates. With graduation just around the corner, they had shed all pretense of civility. One of them sneered, well, Caleb, you spent years as Leo's lapdog, and now you've moved on to his brother? I heard you're even living in their house." The other added, "Don't be so harsh. The guy's got skills servicing two brothers. He's earned his keep." A cold dread filled Caleb. How did they know he was living at the Sterling mansion? The humiliating words made his blood boil. On the screen, Julian's expression had darkened. He told Caleb to let him speak to them. Caleb shook his head, signaling for him to stay quiet. He took out his earbuds. "What's wrong?" he asked them calmly. "Jealous that I have rich friends? Tell you what, I'll give you a chance to earn some money today. Let me beat you to a pulp, and I'll pay you 3 times your medical bills. How about it?" Their faces changed. They started shouting, pointing at him and calling him arrogant, asking if he had no shame, selling his body for money. The commotion drew the attention of other students in the cafeteria. Some even started filming with their phones. Caleb waited for them to finish their tirade. Then he held up his phone, showing Julian's face on the screen. "You heard all that," he said into the phone. "Does that count as slander?" Julian's voice was cold and clear, even through the tiny speaker. "Counts if I say it counts. Tell them to wait for a letter from my lawyers." Caleb then raised his voice. "To anyone who recorded that, please send me the video. I need it as evidence for the police report. I'll pay $1,000 for it." Seeing several students actually approach Caleb, the 2 bullies paled and quickly backed down. The issue was resolved with them recording a public apology video, which they posted to the university's anonymous confessions page. They admitted that Ethan had come to campus asking about Caleb. For a few $100s, they had told him everything they knew. It was Ethan who told them Caleb was living with the Sterlings, twisting the story to paint Caleb as Julian's kept boy. It was all a deliberate attempt to ruin his reputation. The whole affair, while unpleasant, didn't have a lasting impact on Caleb. He was about to graduate and refused to waste energy on such petty matters. Julian, however, cut his business trip short and flew home that night. He walked in, still in his travel clothes, and came straight to Caleb. He apologized. Caleb was confused, asking why he was saying sorry. Julian looked at him earnestly. He said he hadn't been considerate enough, and that his personal affairs had negatively impacted Caleb's life. He took full responsibility. His solemnity made Caleb uncomfortable. It wasn't his fault. It was Ethan's. Julian informed him that he had already instructed the relevant departments in his company to terminate all contracts with Ethan's family business. But he added that was a punishment for Ethan, not compensation for Caleb. Caleb, ever practical, saw a financial opportunity. He asked how Julian planned to compensate him. "If you're willing," Julian said, his voice dropping slightly, "I want to be your real boyfriend. I want to take care of you in every way possible." Caleb felt a pang of disappointment. All that talk for this? He'd rather have the remaining $20,000 of his debt forgiven. But since the topic was on the table, he decided it was a good time to have a serious conversation. He confessed that he'd never been in a relationship before and had never really considered his sexuality. He wasn't sure what he felt for Julian, but he could say he wasn't repulsed by him. However, his main priority was studying for his exams, and he didn't have the mental energy for a relationship. He asked if Julian understood. Julian's expression was hard to read. He said he understood that a person's energy is limited. Caleb clapped his hands in excitement. "Exactly. So I think we should try just dating first. After we spend some time together, then we can talk about making it official." Julian let out a breath he seemed to have been holding. That would be wonderful. Fearing he'd given the wrong impression, Caleb quickly added, "Don't get too excited. I haven't agreed to be with you. This is just dating." Julian smiled. "I'm just relieved. I was afraid today's incident would make you resent me. But you're even braver than I thought." He then took a step closer, the familiar scent of sandalwood surrounding Caleb.
Kan Yukio,
he asked. Think of it as a test, to see if you're repulsed by the idea. Caught in the moment, Caleb neither agreed nor refused. He just shyly looked down. Julian opened his arms and pulled him into an embrace. Caleb could hear his own heart pounding in his chest. Are you guys gonna eat the takeout I bought? The front door, left ajar from Julian's arrival, swung open. Leo stood there holding 2 boxes of food, his jaw on the floor as he stared at the scene in the living room. Caleb scrambled to push Julian away. Julian shot his brother an icy glare. Weren't you saying you wanted to get back together with your ex-girlfriend? Which city did she live in again? It turned out that Caleb's fears were unfounded. He thought dating would distract him from his studies, but he had forgotten one crucial detail. His date was the CEO of a corporation with over 40,000 employees. Julian's schedule was far busier than his. As a result, most of their dates took place at the mansion, which was equipped with a home theater, a game room, and a pool table. This arrangement had its pros and cons. The biggest con was that it gave Julian ample opportunity to be a scoundrel. He had devised a system of debt reduction. A kiss was worth 500, a hug was 200. By Caleb's calculations, the 20,000 had been paid off long ago, and Julian now owed him several $1,000s. Sometimes, while they were watching a movie on the sofa, Julian's hand would wander to places it shouldn't. Like right now, he was gently, rhythmically kneading Caleb's waist. That tickles, Caleb protested, batting his hand away and trying to sit up straight. But Julian was persistent in his quest for physical contact. You need to get used to it, he murmured. Since you're not repulsed by it, you might even learn to like it. Besides, you and Leo used to scrub each other's backs. This is just a little touch. What's there to be shy about? There it was again, the old history. It's not the same with him. How is it different? I don't like him. Julian tilted his head, a playful glint in his eyes. So you're admitting you like me, then? I said no such thing. Julian captured his hand, lacing their fingers together. Did you two ever hold hands like this? No. He leaned in and quickly pecked Caleb on the cheek. Like this? No. Stop it, you're so annoying. Seeing Caleb was about to lose his temper, Julian swiftly wrapped an arm around his waist, pinning him in the corner of the sofa. But you have slept in the same bed. Leo told me. That time you were both drunk after a party. He just passed out and couldn't make it back to his own room. But you and I haven't slept together yet. Have we gotten to the point where you don't even try to hide your perverted intentions anymore? How is this perverted? Julian countered with a low chuckle. It's just an experiment. What if you're repulsed by the idea of sleeping next to me? We have to confirm these things before we make it official. It seemed oddly logical. Can you promise you'll just sleep? That you won't do anything? Julian's chuckle deepened. I can promise I won't do anything. But I can't promise I'll do nothing. It took Caleb's brain a moment to process the distinction. You shameless jerk. I'm not sleeping with you. Dream on. He was promptly lifted and thrown over Julian's shoulder. Since you've already called me a shameless jerk, Julian's voice rumbled from below. It would be rude not to live up to the title.